Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Showcase Shop Talk. I am Sophie White, Program Manager for the Showcase series at EDUCAUSE, and today we're here to discuss hiring resilience.
And my name is Nicole Muscanell, and I'm a researcher at EDUCAUSE.
And we are really thrilled to have two wonderful guests with us today. We have Brittany Denis, who is Director of the Portfolio Management Office for the College of Charleston, and Marshall White, who is Director at the University System of New Hampshire for Learning Space Technologies. Fun fact, some of you may know me from the other Showcase Shop Talks. I partly got interested in higher education and technology because of my dad, who's worked in this space for a while, and he is here on the show today. So Marshall's my dad. If it seems like I know him already, that is why. But so excited to have everyone here today to talk about hiring resilience, the workforce challenges that we're seeing in higher ed and technology, and some of the opportunities that come with that.
Oh, I thought this was about parental resilience. I'm sorry. No, I'm just...
no old stories from my childhood or anything. Stay away from that. Really excited to have everyone. Nicole actually worked on some of our EDUCAUSE research reports that will be featured in this hiring resilience showcase. So for folks familiar with EDUCAUSE, we released a few reports on the workforce this spring, one targeted more on IT leadership, one on teaching and learning professionals, and one on cybersecurity and privacy professionals. So hoping we can dive into that today, and then also hear from Bree and Marshall about their different experiences working with staff at their institutions. So to get started, I know, Bree, we worked together on the Young Professionals Advisory Committee, and I know when I brought up this idea of hiring resilience, you mentioned that you had done some revamping of your department at the College of Charleston and had been doing some different recruitment and hiring processes. I'm curious if you wanted to talk a little bit about those.
Yeah, of course. So I started at the College of Charleston probably like 3 or 4 months before the pandemic. So I inherited a team of 10, half were project managers, half business analysts. And it was a relatively new department in the last 5 or so years. So it was in its infancy. When I came on, we had to quickly transition to going remote. There was additional challenges that came about with people's personal lives, how they were able to make that transition. And we probably had in that first year about 50% turnover on my team. And so I got immersed real quick in the recruiting process and became best friends with HR, and we had to get creative in how we went about trying to recruit, but also trying to maintain the morale and retain my current employees, given that was a really high turnover rate in such a short period of time. One of the ways we initially started posting the positions, and we had a low amount of applications, and the job fit to applicant wasn't really great initially. And so one of the ways that we kind of worked around that was we partnered with a consulting firm, and we did essentially the try before you buy model. We were very upfront with our needs in that space. We clearly articulated that we were looking for people that were looking to convert, not lifetime consultants that were here for 6 months and looking to go to their next gig. We were interested in people that had the higher education experience, or at least the interest in getting into that industry, and they were aware of some of our budgetary constraints being a state institution, because that is one of the biggest constraints we had in being able to hire strong talent. And so we actually, for about the course of a year, had 4 or 5 consultants join my team, and it was a phenomenal experience. The wealth of knowledge that they brought, the additional tool sets that they had to be able to bring from their consulting experience, enriched my team. It built up our arsenal of tool sets, And I would say we converted, or we hired, we didn't convert anyone. We hired through the process 90% of the consultants that came on, and they have been just such an asset to my team. So we really focused in on that approach. We also went through, when looking at recruiting, we went through and we changed a lot of our position descriptions. There's been studies out there looking at minorities, speaking specifically to gender. Men will apply to positions that they reach 60% of their requirements, and they'll reach for that position. Women typically apply to positions they feel they need 100% of their requirements. So how do we make sure that we're getting that diverse pool for all different minorities, being very cognizant of where we're posting our positions, where do different minorities look for positions, and how do we make sure we're advertising there? One of the unanticipated benefits that we saw going through the Try Before You Buy is it opened up our candidate pool nationally. We made our positions remote permanently, which was a big transition for us, especially for the business analyst side of the house, because they work so closely with the business that there was a real value for them being on campus. And so we made it remote, and I would say our diversity numbers, my team is the most diverse team within IT. And I would say we put strong competition out there at the institution because of the candidates we were able to get through that consulting firm, just opening up that pool. So those are some of the strategies that we've put in place on the recruiting side. I don't know, Marshall, some of what you've been able to apply in your area.
Yeah, I guess maybe backing up a little bit, my story is similar, Bree, I think, in that my whole organization changed right before the pandemic, similar to yours. So in my situation, each one of the campuses in the university system of New Hampshire was its own entity. And then right before the pandemic, we centralized, like many other universities have done. So I think it was in January or so of 2020, we said all the IT groups across all the campuses are moving into one IT group. My group is actually kind of audiovisual services or learning space technologies. So we support the classrooms and that sort of thing. So I feel like all the teams that came from the different campuses that then became my team, we were sort of forged in fire. That's the way I think about it, that for the pandemic, we all had to come together. And as all of you know, we all struggled to try to help faculty kind of transition to high flex mode and hybrid modes, and what fun that was. But, again, kind of forged in fire, trying to do all this work. We also were tasked with a gigantic project to take CARES Act funding, federal funding, and outfit 50% of our classrooms across the system with hybrid capabilities. So this had to happen in 2.5 months. The idea was, let's get students back into the classroom in fall of 2020 as much as we can. So my group pushed through that project, and I think we had a little swagger after that. We felt good about ourselves, and we felt like, wow, we had done, a great job with this project. A lot of people on my team had to stretch to do additional things. And I think back on that in terms of retaining employees, that I think it was a real lesson for me that giving employees a stretch goal and giving them a project that really is a little bit outside of their comfort zone really kind of bonded all the team, but it also made each one of the employees feel good about themselves. Unfortunately, that kind of dried up after a while, and then other kind of higher paying higher ed schools in our area. I'm in New Hampshire, so we're an hour from Boston. So Dartmouth and Harvard are some of our better technicians recently. And so I really had to get into really understanding how to retain employees. It's been kind of a churn. I've lost a lot of people recently, but it's and with help from the EDUCAUSE work that I think Nicole worked on, I've really realized that I'm not alone with this, and I learned that some of the tricks that we're using are to just really emphasize that this is a fun place to work. It's we can have a great work environment. We encourage people to take their time off. The work-life balance becomes really important, not only to talk about, but actually walk the walk. So that's one of the things we've worked on, is to try to get the people that are here and just be upfront with them. We're not going to be able to compete with Dartmouth and Harvard. But we can, have a great work environment. We can build up your skills. We can kind of create a career pathway for you. If you go off to Dartmouth and Harvard, good for you. That's my new attitude. And also, I think that we try to shift people into projects that they enjoy. And different people enjoy coming to work for different reasons, as we know. So, I try to look across my team and say, there's a person that really likes heads down design work. Well, let's get them to do more of that, to try to get people to do more of what they like to do, rather than me be a taskmaster and say, you're going to do this, So really, it's been a major change in the way I think about managing teams. So,
and I think both of the examples that you've pointed out really speak to our findings. So, across the 3 studies, we kind of saw a lot of dissatisfaction with people not being able to work on maybe projects that they want to, Marshall. And so it sounds like you've got a good strategy there, because we saw a lot of people saying, because of having to prioritize and with increasing workloads, we have to neglect a lot of things that we don't want to. It feels like that's a key area that institutions might want to focus on. And then Bree, I love that you brought up kind of tackling the diversity aspect of hiring. If you look at all 3 of our studies, that's actually when we asked respondents, how can staffing issues be addressed? Recruiting more diverse applicant pools was like at the bottom of the list for across all 3 studies. So it's interesting to see kind of that's not ranking high. It's not a top priority, at least according to our research, but that seems to be something that seems to be really fruitful for you.
Yeah, it's been really impactful. And obviously, when you bring a new team member on, it changes the dynamic of the team. There's a give and take of adjusting to that communication style, how they manage their work, how they collaborate. But I think the true value is, once that ebbs and flows a little bit and everyone settles into their roles and, how they're going to work together, is that they're bringing experience not just from, like we all do. We all bring experience not just from our previous work experience. We're bringing it from how we brought up, the cultures we come from, our work experience, our personal interactions with our communities, which is a professional community in some cases, but also our personal communities. And I think that being able to have diversity in our candidate pools, and ideally with who we're hiring, I don't think that gets enough attention with the value that it brings. Certainly, you could say that it introduces sometimes more conflict potentially because there's differing opinions, but I don't think that conflict has a negative connotation in this context. I think that healthy disagreement challenges your own perceptions and allows you to consider from different angles, and allows you to grow and expand beyond what your own experience is. So it's definitely been very impactful to my team. And it's kind of set an example for other teams at our institution with how they kind of approach their hiring practices to be a little bit more diverse.
Nicole, do you have your thoughts on why that ranked so low in the responses? That was surprising to me.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if maybe a lot of the respondents who we polled aren't too directly involved with, hiring practices. And so it might not be the most immediate thing that comes to mind. And the most, not surprising, but the most immediate thing that comes to everybody's mind is salaries and benefits. So I think it's just something that probably seems maybe less directly related unless you really work in that area, or if in Bree's case, you've kind of seen exactly what that can actually do in terms of hiring and retention, probably. I think it's just not as an obvious answer. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's difficult. It seems like always trying to find that mix of people where you start to have the quote unquote high performing team, right? And boy, once you get the high performing team where there's just a lot of trust amongst the people, they kind of want to hang out together. They want to work late. They want to exceed everybody's expectations, that kind of thing. It's kind of magical, but it's really rare. And one person that joins the group can tear the whole thing down. And I have a group of about 13 people, so it's small. We have 50 students and stuff, but I'm just talking about FTE sort of. But I've seen over the years that trying to make sure that everybody kind of runs, pulls the rope in the same direction, I guess is the cliche, but is tough.
I'm also thinking about the high performing teams, and I know you mentioned kind of having stretch goals where you have employees that you can challenge them just enough so that they're, learning and feeling fulfilled in their work, feeling valued. Nicole, I remember that I think it was the teaching and learning workforce report. There was a section about how burnout is one of the highest indicators that someone will leave. So let me know if I'm quoting that incorrectly. But I know we've seen a lot about burnout being an issue, and kind of how do you find that balance between letting someone stretch and giving them challenging roles, but not getting them burnt out to the point that they want to leave your team, because that's bad.
Yeah, that's really tough. For instance, my team, because we work in the classrooms or other services that we do require us to be on campus, we don't have the benefit of offering remote work really as an attractant. So I always have felt as if we're even more prone to burnout or having people just think that the day-to-day work is a slog. So it's tough. I think in the last 4 years since the pandemic, we really have had less capacity and more demand on our services. So I think we're working harder in the last 4 years than we've ever worked in my group. It's definitely difficult. I don't have a great answer, except I guess at the beginning when I was talking about just making people take their time off, making people take their vacations, talking to them about, burnout, being very direct about it. If you see someone that's really just working 6 days a week, working on Saturdays and things like that, stop them, or working late, just tell them in terms of burnout over time. Yeah, just try to have your eyes open and look around. I don't know, Bree, if you have some thoughts on that.
So I'm in a slightly different position where at this point, 100% of my team is either remote or hybrid. So we do have that additional flexibility that your team doesn't really get. And I know from conversations I've been involved in on campus, those roles like yours that have to be on campus are very disgruntled over that feeling of inequality with access to that benefit, and how that allows employees who are able to be remote to have more work-life integration as opposed to work-life separation. And so my office in particular is tied to like any single project that touches IT comes in through my office for the most part. Whether my business analysts are doing the business process design, coming up with recommendations, gathering requirements, or my project managers are running it as a project. And so my office feels a really heavy burden for that mentality of doing more with less, essentially. So I don't think we've come to a solution, and I haven't found anyone that does have that solution. One of my teams in particular, I like to joke that they're training me. As some new members have come on and they've come from more agile workplaces, anytime I go to them and we talk about like new work that's coming up, they are very intentional about asking me what is a lower priority that can be pushed to next week. And we're kind of doing that mental exercise, and it's worked so far. It's been sustainable with my team. Obviously, there's a lot that's out of our control, but it's been working, and I've tried to bring that kind of back to the larger IT leadership team because, we're all interconnected with how we achieve these projects. But that doing less with less that was referenced in one of the reports that came out, it actually pulled on EAB just released a state of the sector presentation as well, and they touched on that as well. And I brought it back to my CIO, and I was talking to him because we're in a more with less mentality right now. And I was like, how do we make that transition to less is less? How do we become more sustainable so that we can increase our retention of our employees? Because right now, pre-pandemic, I'm sure people felt they were busy. Pandemic, we were putting out technology, software, adjusting. Our support levels increased significantly no matter what role you were. And I feel that few institutions have dropped and gone back to pre-pandemic levels. Rather, the institution has been like, wow, look at all that we can achieve. Mm-hmm. Let's keep the progress going. And I think that is the driving factor behind these larger burnout numbers. But I think there's a lot of challenges with transitioning to do less with less. It sounds nice. It seems more sustainable. But with the enrollment cliff that's coming up, there's a big hesitation to hire new people. If you're state, it's really hard to get new lines. But you have to balance that with the fact that to automate our own processes so that we can do more with less, do less with less, then we have to be able to have more resources up front to be able to get that automation so we don't need as much to sustain it. I know here in South Carolina, our governor just released that he's putting out a request for a $3 million investment to look at if we need, I think we have 33 public institutions in South Carolina, to see if we need all 33 or if there can be consolidations and mergers. And that doesn't sit well with some of us in South Carolina, especially because I believe 14 institutions closed last year alone. So I think the balance of we have to transition to less is less so that we can pick and choose more easily. Like you said, Marshall, the project or the passion projects that, ignite that spark that makes them want to come to work. But how we get there, I think, is a little bit of a challenge and an unknown.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned less with less. I wonder how many CIOs have used that kind of buzzword around IRED, because my CIO definitely did, started about a year and a half ago. And it made me think about some of the tactics that he has used, because to his credit, he's tried to let us all know that we're not doing more with less. We're doing less with less. And so we kind of push back. And so we're trying to manage up kind of and say, can you communicate that back out? Our customer base is all faculty, the academic side of the house. So can you communicate that out to the provost's office and all the way down through the deans and the faculty to say, our resolution times are going to be extended. We're not going to be able to solve issues in one business day. Potentially, it could be two or more. And they need to, have their expectations set correctly. And to his credit, he's been great about that. And so it took a while, but I think that through some communication that was broad communication by our IT department that basically set expectations that we're going to do the best we can, but it may take a longer time. So I'm trying to tell my team, do less with less, but do an excellent job with whatever you're doing less of. Yeah. It's kind of a message.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that stuck out to me. And what I've been having some conversations on is, because we're not hiring new people, we're not creating new lines, we are asking our people to take on more responsibilities so that we can, continue to achieve what we need to achieve. And they report the same thing that, Nicole, you kind of found in the studies, that they're having to pick and choose with what gets put on hold and what they do. And I think that side effect of that maybe isn't at the forefront of all of our minds is not just the impact to morale in general, but when it comes to like performance review time, which is often tied to raises and merit bonuses, if your institution does that, if they're having to pick and choose, I can't get this job responsibility done because you've added these 3 additional ones, and still being assessed against this. Not only do they not feel good that they are not meeting expectations, but potentially it could formally be documented that they're just not being set for success, essentially. I think that plays an important role, as we keep trying to add more to our position descriptions to get more robust roles, which, there's a benefit to that in that our employees, through the career pathways that we established, like you said, get more opportunity to take on different responsibilities that maybe they normally wouldn't. And that is a form of professional development that even if they use us as a launch pad to go, in your case, Harvard's of the world, that, we got them for 4 or 5 years. And the value they added in those 4 or 5 years is what we needed. And we'll go on to the next employee. Obviously we want to see all of our employees thrive and do what's best for them professionally as well as personally there.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up. So, and we did see some of this, especially in our teaching and learning professionals report. They were very vocal about part of the burnout aspect wasn't just like, oh, I'm too busy all the time, but it was this sentiment of, I feel like I'm performing poorly.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm dropping the ball and like I'm not doing great work. And this is something that's really seriously stressing them out and adding to that feeling of burnout. So I love that, the less is less, and what Marshall you added, but do a really excellent job on the less things that you're actually doing. I think that would be really helpful to, promoting morale, kind of helping to reduce some of those feelings of burnout, and like your self-efficacy is decreasing because you're just being stretched too long.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that work for me that really, I think all of us in higher ed, we know that we can't compete based on salaries with corporate, similar jobs in the corporate world. So why do people, work in higher ed? And I think, a lot of it is the altruism sort of, it's a great product to help students learn. But I think the less with less message was really tough at first because people took it as, oh, we're supposed to just do substandard work, and we had to say, no, you can do excellent work, because that's what drives a lot of people on my team is do a really great job, but you're just going to have to defer some projects off to next year, even if you have to.
Well, I think that's it. Oh, go ahead, Bree.
I was going to say, we're trying to do a culture change, kind of similar to what you're talking about. And one of the ways that we're trying to achieve that is because when we take on projects and we overburden our IT staff, the business departments are facing the same staffing shortages and the same burnout issues that we're facing within IT. And so when we say, all right, we'll do that project that you need, that requires resources on the business. And so one of the ways that we're trying to not say no, but to talk through what we do today versus what we push back 2 months, 3 months, but we'll get to it, is when a business comes to us and says, I need this new technology, we need this project, that our business analysts ask a question and formally document, here are the priorities that your department, your division is working on. What is the lowest priority item that potentially we need to push back so that we accommodate your availability, where we frame it very much that it's a support model to them, but it also benefits us and our ability to prioritize to exactly what you were getting at, Marshall.
Yeah, that's really smart.
Yeah, I love that transparency. I was going to say, it ties really well. We came up with this issue of hiring resilience because it arose in the EDUCAUSE top 10 report that we put out every year, where folks in higher ed technology choose the top 10 biggest issues. And the theme of that whole report was around institutional resilience, which I think ties to this idea of, now that we're past the frantic era of the pandemic, how do we set our institutions up to weather the enrollment cliff, the budget challenges, staffing challenges, all these things we're seeing. But I think it ties to, personal resilience of staff too. So I love all of these different methods for doing that.
Yeah, and I really liked Bree. I don't think we've really punched up what you're doing to kind of rework job descriptions and maybe reclassify people, provide equity increases where possible. So I've done a lot more of that in the last 4 years than I've done in the previous 25, I think. Just making sure that the job descriptions are accurate. And then if you do have to go out and hire a new person into that position, that it's less work then, and it's a more attractive looking job description too.
Absolutely.
One question I did have for both of you. So as I was reviewing some of the hiring resilience work we've done, I saw that some institutions are really working on their student worker pipeline. So training students to prepare them for the technology roles that, you'll need to fill in the future. Are either of you doing anything with undergraduate or graduate students to support your workforce and support their development?
I have a gap between the student pipeline and then the entry level kind of full-time employee. So I guess the answer is no. I'm not getting students. We've got sort of a pipeline of students to move up through the student ranks, and then we've got a whole nother kind of pipeline of full-time employees moving up. Upward mobility through our organization, but the gap between like taking senior students and bringing them into entry level, haven't worked enough at that.
So, not my department specifically. There was a point about a year and a half ago where the graduate school approached me. They have a business analytics program, and they thought it would be a good pairing to be able to place a graduate student within my department, give them that experience. Then who knows, maybe they could, enter my team as a team member. But I think at the time we were still in the throes of the pandemic and restructuring our department and hiring in. And I don't think that we were at a point that we could fully support that student and kind of develop that pipeline to be able to allow them to grow within it up to being a full-time employee. I know informally at the college that we've done that. We have that, especially we start a lot of students off in the service desk, and then oftentimes they're there for 1 to 3 years, depending on the employee. And then they enter our enterprise applications management team in one of their entry level roles. And through kind of their mentorship with senior level people, they've been able to grow a lot of really strong employees that way. But we don't have a formal process, but I have heard a few people speak actually recently where they've developed even like academies within their institution that support that pipeline that they're actually pulling from. A lot of institutions have cybersecurity majors and professionals. And that's an area that's obviously growing from the research, that they have IT, information technology areas that you could pull students in. Even just starting to do maybe club engagements, to do speaker events and get that interest. I do think it's challenging a little bit with the student population. So I'm also an adjunct faculty. And sometimes I find there's such diversity in the students that you have. You have those students that are just intrinsically motivated, those go-getters that, want that internship. They want to get that experience. And then I've had students come up to me and they've asked me, what is the minimum number of assignments that I need to do just to pass this class? And so I think that's a challenge today, especially some of the generational differences that have come out with what the newer generations expect from a work environment, to be able to formalize that pipeline. Also, there's a lot of students today are used to a lot of accommodations, especially since the pandemic. And so being able to help them transition successfully to a workplace that maybe offers flexibility and work environment, but the ability to have like time and a half in a workplace isn't quite a luxury that, the industry has adopted to yet. So I think there's some challenges in that, and my institution hasn't been able to formally approach that yet, but we've had some success on a kind of a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, I know that's something we've talked about with young professionals at EDUCAUSE, because I feel like supporting those students interested in the industry and those entry-level professionals, sometimes folks don't even know what resources are out there available to them, because we have so many senior leaders who've been around for a while. So I think it's a challenge industry-wide.
Yeah.
Great. I'm trying to think what else about Nicole. Is there anything else related to these reports that you really wanted to highlight?
I don't know. So I will say we kind of wanted to do these 3 breakouts, assuming that we'd probably see some differences. I actually did go back recently and I was going to try to put together an infographic comparing some of the key findings, but I don't know. And maybe this is not surprising. I don't know what you all think. I was not able to do an infographic because the 3 different fields and disciplines were actually so similar in terms of what the state of the workforce is right now. And so I guess to come back to what Marshall, you mentioned at the beginning, it does seem that everyone's kind of in the same boat or a similar boat. I was very surprised that we didn't see more differences across the different workforce areas, but I think right now what we're seeing is a lot of higher ed institutions in terms of workforce are just experiencing same challenges and things that have been going on for a while now, things, staffing, budget, kind of rising uncertainty now that we know enrollment issues we're going to be facing. So I don't know that that's super insightful, but I just found that to be super surprising. I thought we'd get some differences between the three areas.
Right. I think there's a perfect storm of challenges right now in higher ed, right? I mean, you talk about the 18-year-old cliff, the enrollment cliff. I think the pandemic certainly, all of a sudden we're all working remotely, and then some of us are coming back full-time, many people hybrid. Does that decrease kind of the output of, are we getting 65% of output, or are we getting 100%? There's a lot of argument about that. Certainly the FAFSA debacle is not helping us right now. But a lot of what I'm seeing we're training people up for a couple of years, and then they go off to take a job that's fully remote, and that repeats itself. So I think as people sort of, if they ever kind of return to 3 days a week on site or something like that, maybe that churn will decrease a little bit. But right now, those are really attractive positions. So I'm struggling to keep people here because they have to be here 5 days a week. Yeah.
I think it can be different but equally challenging even when you have remote employees. Obviously, we've addressed that salary is a constraint just across the industry when, trying to retain talent. And I think that when you're on campus, you have a stronger tie to the campus. You are seeing people, you're having those hallway conversations, maybe you're attending campus events that are happening, whether it's during the day or on the weekend, going to the basketball game on a Friday after work. You build a stronger connection that way. And so sometimes when you see another position, even if it pays more, you kind of sit back and you're like, do I really want to give up my Friday basketball games? I love working with this person. I love being on this committee. But remote employee, they can't attend those basketball games. They're not having the same hallway conversation. And so a big area that we've been trying to focus in on to have retention is on building that tie to campus. So like we try to do it at least once a year. We're trying to get to 2 times a year, like an on-site retreat where we fly our people in and they meet with all of our leadership, and we go out to dinner, and we have social events with professional events, and we have working time. We've also been really strategic about how we approach like professional development. Historically, we've sent one person. If they were having an agile conference, we would send like one project manager. They attend, they come back, they present, disperse that knowledge. We all gain from it. Now that we're mostly remote, we're actually sending like the entire team to the agile conference. That way they can attend all of the sessions, divide and conquer. They regroup together and are able to digest that information real time as a bonding activity during the conference. And then they bring that back as a team, which increases the collaboration with when they present that back to the larger audience. So we've been trying to do that. We also encourage trying to get involved in like staff advisory committees, these cross-institution committees that just connect them to the business, further to the campus. And not only am I an adjunct faculty, one of my team members is, and another one is looking to become adjunct. So for those, whether they're teaching online, which remote employees can still be adjuncts, or whether they're doing a hybrid or in person, just further connecting them to the students. So that way they can kind of see the value of the work that they're doing and who we're there to support. So that's been the bigger focus of how to maintain that connection and have that, that high performing team culture where they feel loyalty to each other while being remote and having such increased competition salary wise. So that's been more of our challenge.
Yeah, that's really interesting, that thinking about what I was talking about as a negative thing is also a positive thing. I mean, being on the campus 5 days a week, you're right, it's a benefit because you do get that whole community feel and energy. Yep.
Yeah, I know the reports brought up a sense of belonging as, a big indicator of someone's likelihood of being retained as well. I was just going to say, I've worked in person and now fully remote roles, and I have been impressed by how with some, thought and discussion with your teammates, you can really build those bonds in a remote setting. It just, I think, takes some more time and effort. Like Nicole and I are remote at EDUCAUSE, and I love seeing, photos of your dog on the pet Slack channel. And some of the other things that we all do to get to know each other. So it's just a different landscape, but it has a lot of opportunities too.